This is the Harry Loomis Show.
Welcome back to the Harry Loomis Show. Today is August 13th, and it's not always that in the middle of August we get major hockey news, but we have that today. We have an offer sheet, two offer sheets made by the St. Louis Blues, and we're going to jump right into it. The Blues have tendered offer sheets to two players from the Edmonton Oilers, Philip Broberg, a big left-hand defenseman, and Dylan Holloway, a left-handed shooting center. These are two very recent first-round draft picks from the Oilers, and this is Doug Armstrong taking advantage of the position that the Oilers are in. The Oilers, obviously, they're built differently than any other team in the NHL when you have Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl making a combined $21 million and Draisaitl being due for an extension after next season. They are going to have to get creative with their cap because they're already a team that's pretty tight against the cap, especially with a guy like Darnell Nurse getting over $9 million. And, oh, by the way, you have Evan Bouchard, who had a breakout performance this year, especially in the playoffs. He needs a contract extension after next year as well. So the Oilers are already over the cap right now. They are $7 million over the cap as of right this moment, according to Puckpedia. So they are really in jeopardy of losing two very good young players. We're going to start with Philip Broberg because I think he is the most interesting of the two candidates. He was an 8th overall pick, and looking at the deal that the Blues signed or agreed to with Broberg, it is I don't have the money right here. I'm going to pull it up. It's just over $4 million, which for the offer sheet, since Broberg is a restricted free agent, the Blues would be sending back a second-round pick. They didn't have their second-round pick because they gave it to Pittsburgh in the Kevin Hayes deal, but they made a deal with them this morning to get back their 2025 second-round pick and give the Penguins the 2026 second-round pick. And there was also, I think, a 5th and 6th-round pick that were swapped as well. Broberg's offer sheet is 2 years at $4.58 million. That is the max amount of money a player can get, and the team only give up a second-round pick. But Broberg is a very interesting player. He was drafted 8th overall in the 2019 draft, a pretty highly touted 6'3", 199-pound defenseman. Has the build of a really good NHL player, has struggled to get consistent time in the lineup the past 3 years for the Oilers. He's played 81 career games in the NHL since the 2022 season, 2 goals, 11 assists. There's been some frustration with Broberg from Oilers fans. I even saw trade rumors at the deadline about Broberg possibly coming to St. Louis in a potential Pavel Buchnevich trade. I remember a rumor floating around was Broberg, Warren Foegele, a first-round pick, and potentially more because Buchnevich had this playoff run and the next year under contract before the Blues signed him to this 6-year, $8 million per year extension. But Broberg really did come into his own in the playoffs. He only got into 10 games, but with how bad Darnell Nurse was at certain points, he really stepped up where they needed it. 2 goals, 1 assist for 3 points in 10 games isn't great, but he was a +8 and really provided some stability back there at a time when the Oilers desperately needed it, and they were 1 win away, obviously, from the Stanley Cup. Broberg would fit in so well in the timeline for the Blues. He is a guy that just needs consistent top 4 minutes and just to develop into a good top 4 defenseman, and the Blues are not in a position to really compete for maybe even a playoff spot, let alone a Stanley Cup this year. Let Broberg play in that top 6. This also tells me that Torrey Krug will not be playing this year because this is the 3rd left-handed defenseman that the Blues are potentially bringing in this offseason, with Leddy still around, with Perunovic getting extended, and with Krug still on the roster. I think they're preparing for life without Torrey Krug with Philip Broberg. So looking at that left side, Leddy's probably going to slot into your top left-handed defenseman spot. I would put Broberg on that second pair, have him play with either Parayko or Justin Falk. I think that's a really good veteran player for him to learn from. And then you have selection for the third defenseman, P.O. Joseph Ryan Suter or Scott Perunovich. You could move one of them to the right side as well. But I think of the three defensemen that the Blues have brought in, Broberg definitely has the most upside. And I think that St. Louis could be a really good spot for him to just continue to build and get comfortable and develop into the eighth overall pick type of player that the Oilers saw when they drafted him in 2019. Now, the second player that the Blues tendered an offer sheet to is Dylan Holloway, a 6'1", 206-pound left-handed shooting center. He was drafted 14th overall in the 2020 draft by the Oilers. And Holloway's a weird one. He's a guy that I feel like I've heard about for much longer than he's actually been around. No, he made his debut in the 22-23 season. He's played 89 NHL games the last 2 years, 9 goals, 9 assists, 18 points. Obviously, with the top six that the Oilers have, it's really hard for a young player like Holloway to break in and get top 6 minutes. Just looking at the team, you have McDavid, you have Hyman, Nugent Hopkins, Draisaitl, Evander Kane, Warren Fogle was on the team last year. It was just, there really wasn't a spot for a guy like Holloway, especially who plays center mostly. He was stuck kind of playing third line, fourth line. But he was also a guy that was really solid in the playoffs. He played more games. He got into all 25 that the Oilers were in, scored 5 goals, 2 assists, 7 points. And the contract that the Blues gave Broberg is 2 years at $2.29 million. That will cost them a third-round pick if the Oilers don't match the deal. Now, Holloway is interesting. I think that if the Oilers were to sign or to match the deal on one of these two, it's probably going to be Holloway because it's a cheaper contract and because I think they've seen a little bit more out of Holloway. I think Broberg, from what you've seen out of him at $4 million, is pretty tough to ask. But the Oilers have also had a really busy offseason. They brought in a lot of good forwards like a Victor Arvidsson, like a Matt Savoy from Buffalo, which I still think is one of the best fleecings of a trade we've had this offseason. So where does Holloway fit in the long-term plans? It feels like he's kind of gotten replaced a little bit in the Oilers lineup, but I would be happy, obviously, if the Blues were able to get both of these players, but realistically, I think probably you're going to get one of the two, and I think it's more likely to be Broberg. But if the Blues get Holloway, where does he slot into the lineup? I've kind of mentioned that the Blues are in a little bit of a logjam, especially defensive or offensively. Now the left side is obviously pretty full. My opening day lineup before this move was Neighbors, Thomas, Kyrou, Bolduc, Buchnevich, Saad, Texier, Shen, Joseph, Matthew Joseph that is, and Toropchenko, Faksa, Kapanen. So I think with this move, you're probably going to move Braden Shen back to the second line center. I think if Holloway does join the Blues, he's probably going to play the third line center. Move Buchnevich back to the wing. You can move a guy like Bolduc or Saad back to a third line wing position. And that probably means a guy like Kasperi Kapanen is probably sitting out the first game. I think a line of maybe Holloway, Texier, and Joseph as your third line could be really interesting. Or if you bring in a guy like Zach Bolduc to that third line, him, Holloway, and Joseph could be really interesting. But definitely some interesting moves that the Blues are making today. And I am really curious to see what Stan Bowman and the Oilers are able to do. You have to remember Stan Bowman did just get hired by the Edmonton Oilers as their GM. He used to be the GM of the Chicago Blackhawks, which that isn't lost on me, the fact that Doug Armstrong, offer sheets are something that don't really happen in the NHL. It's kind of, it's kind of that old boys club where, they don't go after their players that much. Some older GMs think it messes with the cohesion of the league and things like that. But Stan Bowman used to GM the Blackhawks. The Blackhawks, obviously, that team with Bowman, with the Kyle Beach situation, a really controversial move to say the least. There's really a lot of respect that was lost from some people. And Doug Armstrong, having been a rival GM of Bowman's in the past, now that he's got a new job, not exactly afraid to try to prize some of his young players. But a good note from Dave Pagnotta of the fourth period. Only 2 of 9 offer sheets were not matched since 2007. That was Dustin Penner, who Edmonton got from Anaheim and got a first, second, and third round pick for. And most recently, Jesperi Kotkaniemi Carolina gave a first and third to Montreal as compensation in 2021. That was basically revenge for the Hurricanes trying to pry Sebastian Aho in 2019. The Canes almost signed him, Kakanyemi in a troll move. They gave him a long contract. That isn't working out too well. But in the moment, the Hurricanes were laughing their butts off of that move. But the other 7 offer sheets that were tenured were matched. Thomas Vanek was offer sheeted by the Oilers in 2007. I forget about this, but David Backes was offer sheeted by Vancouver in 2008. The Blues tendered Steve Bernier in 2008 as well. Nicholas Hjalmarsson from the Blackhawks was tendered by San Jose. The Blackhawks matched that. Shea Weber is a famous one from Philly in 2012, and Predators matched that. I think it was a 14-year contract, that one. Ryan O'Reilly, this is an interesting one. I didn't know this. The Flames offer sheeted O'Reilly in 2013. O'Reilly stuck with Colorado for a year before getting traded to Buffalo. And of course, like I said, Sebastian Aho getting offer sheeted by Montreal in 2019. This is a really interesting time. I wonder if we're going to see more offer sheets in the future. But, you know, for the Blues, where they are this year, this is a pretty low risk, high reward deal. Low risk because you have the cap space right now. You have $7 million in space, potentially up to 14 if Torrey Krug doesn't play this year. And realistically, you're not expecting to make the playoffs. So get these young guys and just see what you have in them. You only have them for 2 years. If Broberg doesn't work, it's only a 2-year deal. You could probably trade him at the 2026 deadline for a team that's in a playoffs or that's in a cup run. You know, a 6'3" left-handed defenseman that could play in the top 4. You're going to get something for that without question, especially at that point. He's going to be 26 years old. That's the time to try to get a guy like Philip Broberg. I really like these moves by Doug Armstrong. You know, people have been down on Armstrong in the last couple of years, really since the Alex Pietrangelo signing, but he's really making savvy moves this year, and this is one of them. He's only got 2 years left as a GM before Alex Steen takes over, and he's definitely not phoning it in up until that time. We'll be back in a week to discuss if the Oilers match either of these offer sheets, and if they don't, we'll talk about how the Blues offense looks now. We'll see what changes they have to make if they bring one or both of these guys in, but we will discuss that in 7 days because the Oilers do have 7 days to potentially match the offers. So we will get back to that in a week. Thank you for watching the Harry Loomis Show. We'll be back with another video discussing a proposal I have for a new NASCAR playoff format, so stay tuned for that. But this is the Harry Loomis Show, and I'll see you again very shortly.
This is the Harry Loomis Show.